Welcome to the Binge Dietitian podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Sumner, registered dietitian, focusing on helping men and women end binge eating, end food guilt, and finally say yes to life. This podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not substitute for medical and personalized advice. So I didn't even know about this until I actually took a step back and looked back into my binge eating days, and it really hit me. Wow, I was a people pleaser. But you might have come into this episode thinking, wait a second, how can people pleasing lead to binge eating urges or even cause me to binge eat? But first, I want to ask you, are you a people pleaser? Do you say yes to everything whenever people ask you a favor or they just simply want to hang out with you? Maybe sometimes you don't even want to say yes, but you feel that you don't want to ruin your relationship with that person. Maybe saying no might come off as really rude, disrespectful, or ungrateful. Maybe that other person has done a lot for you, so you just have to say yes because you're trying to repay their favors in kind. Maybe you're just so focused on how other people would view you and you want to be seen as the kind, helpful friend, son or daughter, because that was me. I was personally saying yes to everything and that really burned me out. But people were liking me and they were praising me for being so helpful. I was getting so much attention and certain friends would approach me all the time because they know I wouldn't say no for an answer. It seemed though, even though I was caring and kind, that I was completely on the inside, I was completely burnt out. I was giving much, much more than I was receiving, and I had completely no source of joy. So at the end of the day, I would look forward to a massive binge episode wherein I'd order tons of takeaway, several dishes of Chinese, because I'd love Chinese. I'd cook myself also a massive portion of egg fried rice whilst I was waiting for the order to come. And on top of that, I'd order a couple of packets of chips from the Chinese restaurant as well. Then when the delivery driver would come and knock on my door, he said, "Well, I hope you enjoy your family meal." And little did he know, I was on my own. I was enjoying this family meal for one. So I was people-pleasing so much that I had completely no source of happiness or contentment. And there was this kind of false contentment or happiness, but it was coming from the approval of others. But I personally feel that looking back at it now and looking back to where I am now is that this source of happiness isn't true if you're not happy yourself. This approval from others isn't really true happiness if you're not happy yourself. So my only source of happiness at the end of the day would be my binge episodes. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying binge episodes are all fun and joy. During the moment, they are, but at the end of it, when I couldn't lie down because of how full I was, my belly was so stretched out and sometimes I would be at the point of being almost sick, then these binge episodes were not fun at all afterwards. And that's not including the guilt and the mental abuse you give yourself. Telling myself, why did I do that? I was not disciplined enough. Why? I'm just being so lazy. I would never let that happen again. So the next day comes, and I'd take this role of a people pleaser again. I hope you can see now how being a serial people pleaser, should I say, can lead to increased binge urges. In a way, jumping onto very restrictive weight loss diets, cutting out certain food groups, or several food groups, to chase a certain body look, is in a way people pleasing. Focusing on a certain body look and doing everything that you might, even if it costs your mental health, is really a way of people pleasing. So I want you to think, is it worth it? Am I chasing this body to make me feel better, or is it actually the approval of others that I think and hope will make me happy? That's something to think about. So here are 3 ways how I stopped being a people pleaser and what I used to escape the people pleasing mentality. So number 1, I want you to think, if I say no to this person, will this person actually hate me? If they do, then this person is honestly not worth being around because your mental health comes first. And if you're around people who are honestly just hating you for not doing what they want, then you don't want to be associated around those people because you're on a self-care recovery journey. Binge eating recovery is a self-care journey. If they won't hate you, that's perfectly fine, and 9 out of 10 times, they would just simply say, no worries, I'll ask someone else. It won't be the end of the world. Number 2, if you were to say no, think what might happen. Do you think you'd have much more mental space for yourself to relax? Do you think you'd have more you time to do the things you love? Maybe more time for things you have passion for? You sometimes have to outweigh the benefits and the risks, as sometimes we might not be able to say no to every single thing, and we need to think about where your own headspace is. Are you maybe feeling a bit more tired or burnt out lately? Then maybe you might need to say no a little more than usual. Because remember, our mental health is like a phone battery, and we should often try to be at our 80 to 100% charged. If we reach close to 0%, it'll take much, much longer to charge. And remember, some people might not ever catch up to their 80 to 100% because they're giving much more than they're receiving. So number 3, remember, when you say no, you don't owe or you don't deserve to give them an explanation. You might be thinking this might be really rude, and to be honest, it's best to just tell the truth. And try to avoid making up an elaborate story about why you can't do something. The fewer the details, the better. So which sounds more believable? I'll pass on that, thank you. Or, I'll pass, thank you, because I'm going to a swing dancing event with the Prince of Wales and I don't have anything to wear. I need to stop at the store and get some shoelaces. And also, my car's run out of petrol and my family members are going to Scotland. Also, I forgot to mention that I need to clean the house before I leave tonight, and so on and so on. You don't ever have to go into that much detail, but you get my point. So remember, the much less detail, the better. Here are some suggestions for ways to say no without sounding rude. No, thank you. I'm afraid I can't do that today. I'll pass, thank you. I'm not really into that, but thanks for asking. I'd rather not, but thank you. So remember, once again, no one deserves your explanation. If they do ask for an explanation, just be honest that you're feeling really tired, and if they do respect that, that's perfect. If they don't, you might have to disassociate with that person for a while, as some people might be what are called social vampires, which are people that are mentally draining, and I mean that at the most professional way. So when I struggled with binge eating, being a people pleaser was one of the most horrible things I did to myself and for my binge eating issues. I was burning myself out, saying yes to everything. I was giving much more than I was receiving, only to get a tiny moment of happiness from a massive takeaway. And then, the next day, I'd have to wear my people-pleasing mask to be that person who says yes and seems very helpful, but on the inside was burnt out, exhausted, probably crying in the inside whenever someone would ask, Jonathan, can you do this? So, when I stopped being a people pleaser and focused on what I want, and I said no to certain things, my social battery was recharging much more efficiently. I started to receive much more than I was giving, and my binge eating urges, most importantly, massively decreased from a social point of view, because I was receiving much more happiness outside of food. And if you struggle with people pleasing and binge eating, I want you to remember that I offer one-to-one coaching, or you can check out my online resources in the link in the description of this podcast. And if you found this episode really helpful, then I would really appreciate it if you rated this podcast well to help others escape the people pleasing and binge eating trap. It's a terrible cycle to be in, and I've been there, and it's not a good place to be in. But coming from me, who is now a recovered binge eater, it is possible. So see you in the next episode, and remember to say no. If you found this podcast helpful, you would definitely benefit from my binge eating freedom course in my website, bingedietitian.com. Learn more about the triggers to why you're binge eating and how to stop binge eating for good. No more food guilt, no more jumping from diet to diet, and no more shame. Go to the link in this episode for my binge eating freedom course to be one step closer to being binge free, starting today.